It's been a month. We have had 3 typhoons here in Taiwan. None of them have directly hit Taipei or northern Taiwan. They've all gone up the east coast or they've gone down south, but we've gotten a ton of rain and a ton of wind, which has been interesting to run in. We've also gotten some of the hottest temperatures of the summer yet, which is saying something because it's been a very hot summer. Oh, I got COVID halfway through August. That was awesome. And I learned a ton about shoes and training. And there's a lot to talk about there. So, welcome to the second episode of my New York City 2023 Marathon Training series. Let's just jump in. Let's start with a review of the macro goals that I laid out in episode 1. If you haven't watched that episode, I'll put a link in the description. If you're interested, go back and watch it, come back and watch this. I go into much more detail about these macro goals. So, as I stated in the last episode, the 4 macro goals that I was really focused on for this build were lengthening my stride, maintaining foot health, maximizing recovery, and fueling optimization. Now, on the lengthening my stride goal, I think I've done pretty well. I spent most of August, about 4 weeks, exclusively in Asics shoes, which really allow me to really hammer the forefoot, really work on my stride. And overall, I've noticed about a 3 to 6 centimeter, which is about a 2 to 4 inch change consistently to my stride, which isn't a lot, but for only about a month of effort, I'm pretty happy with it. I've also noticed my heart rate has gone down a couple beats, like 2 to 3 for the same level of effort. And I attribute that to just a more lengthened stride, less of a shuffle and a longer stride, which, I don't know, I'm pretty happy with that. So I think this one's been a success. So we get a green check for this one. The next one is around maintaining foot health. So I haven't had any plantar fasciitis. I should knock on wood. That's real wood. I haven't had any toenail issues, toenail trauma, nothing like that. So that's been good. But I have had some mobility, the hallux limitus issues in my big toes, which I will get into in the shoe section of this video towards the end because I realized what was going on there. And a couple weeks ago, I got the most insane blister I've definitely gotten this year and maybe ever. And I've learned a bit of a life hack of how to deal with blisters. And you can thank my wife for this one. So when you have a blister, you should never pop it. So you get that dome and it has the liquid in it and it's very kind of soft. And if you run on that, it tends to grow. Don't pop that. Leave that. Never pop that thing. What the life hack I found was, again, thanks to my wife, was that 100% natural tea tree oil, not something with tea tree in it, but it has to be 100% tea tree oil. Put that on the blister and it will dry the blister out. So if the typical recovery for a blister is, let's say, 3 to 5 days, the tea tree oil cuts it down to maybe 2 days, 3 days tops, at least where it doesn't hurt anymore, at least where it's not really puffed up and it kind of sinks back down and sort of scabs over, which is what you want. You want the liquid to go out, but you don't want to expose the skin under it. So you want the outer skin to get hard, and you want the liquid to go out. Tea tree oil, it is the thing I wish I would have known about years ago because it just dries the blister out, makes that skin very firm, and just cuts down the recovery time significantly. So if you're blister prone, go find some 100% tea tree oil. You'll thank me and my wife for this. So overall, this one's been a bit of a mixed bag. I'm going to give it sort of the really sort of upset, sad face because blisters suck. Maximizing recovery, the next point. So overall, this one's been pretty good. Sleep has been decent. It's always a little bit challenging with the AC on, AC off, the temperature changes, all of that sort of stuff. But sleep's been okay. Mobility training, yoga. I've been very consistent with the mobility training, especially in the last couple weeks. Every day before my run, I'm doing sort of the drills that I do every day, which is really focused around strengthening the arch, maintaining toe mobility, opening up the Achilles, the calf, all that sort of stuff. Do that daily. I do yoga, a short sort of 10-minute yoga flow, maybe 3 days a week. That's been good. Meditation, I've slacked a little bit on just because I've been so busy with stuff on the channel, launching a podcast, plus other work on top of that. The one thing that I have had a little issue with is shoes and recovery from shoes, specifically Asics shoes and specifically FF Turbo. I'll get more into this in the shoe section, but FF Turbo and me after a hard workout don't really like one another. So this one sort of gets a meh face. And fueling optimization, overall, this one's been okay. I've been playing with Martin. I use Martin gels and drink mixes for training. I've been playing with timing of Martin before long or hard workouts, 2 hours out, 3 hours out, night before sometimes. Really experimenting with that. I think I'm learning a bit there. Overall sort of nutrition has been decent, even though I had a burger a couple hours ago, but it's been decent. It's been good. Generally, my wife and I eat pretty clean, so it's fine. Fueling during hard workouts, meaning Martin gels, playing around with that. And I'm also playing around with hydration mixes pre and post and protein recovery drinks post, especially for hard workouts. Really when I should use them versus when I don't need them. So overall, a lot of learnings here. So this gets a green check. And this will be the topic of the next episode, the one you'll see next month. So I'll get more into this and my specific race strategy with all of this stuff then. Now, for the New York City Marathon, I am targeting a 3 hour, 9 minute, 53 second or under 3 hour, 10-minute marathon finishing time, which gives me a 4 minutes, 30 seconds per kilometer pace or 7 minutes, 15 seconds per mile. Now, this is, I feel achievable, and it's not, I think, the outright pace that I may be capable of. And there's a lot of sort of concerns I have around the New York City course. But it feels achievable. It feels something that I can manage. And 4:30 per kilometer pace right now here in Taipei in this hot weather feels comfortable. And it's the first time I've entered a training block where my ultimate race pace feels comfortable. So that's kind of nice. Now, my sort of backup or the B plan, if you will be anything under a 3:20 marathon. So that's about a 4:44 per kilometer or a 7:38 per mile time. Now, that is if stuff sort of all goes south and I'm just trying to get what I came there to do, which is really a Boston qualifying time. So 3:20 puts me right at the edge because I'm between two age groups right now. Next year, I'll be a new age group. I'm at the top of the current age group. So 3:20 is my current age group, Boston qualifier cutoff time. Obviously, I want that under 3:10 time because, again, I want some cushion there with the BQ time. But 3 hours 20, I would be happy with it. If everything goes south, that's going to be my fallback or my B plan. So that all works. So for my primary paces, really what I'm looking at here, and I'm looking at my screen so I can read these correctly, is that my marathon pace is 4:30 per kilometer or 7:15 per mile. Now, the way I've always broken down pacing is like this. Take your marathon pace time in kilometers, and I'm sorry, this formula only works in kilometers. It doesn't work in miles. So if you think in miles, you have to convert your mile marathon time or pace to kilometers, and then you can do this sort of formula. Sorry, Americans, I train in kilometers. They make more sense to me. I like them better. I like all this sort of the 42 different checkpoints when you're on a course in a marathon versus the 26. I just prefer kilometers, so sorry. But basically, how I've always figured out other paces is take your marathon pace, then subtract 12, 22, 32, 52, and then you'll get your half marathon, 10K, 5K, and 1 mile time. And then add 30 seconds and 60 seconds or essentially 90 seconds on top of your 5K pace, which is another rule of thumb that I think a lot of people use. And that gives me my aerobic pace and my easy pace. Now, those are not finite. It's just I don't go faster than those for that type of running. So for easy runs, I never go faster than 5:30 per kilometer or about 8:51 per mile. And for aerobic runs, I keep it between 5 minutes per kilometer and 5:30 per kilometer. That's sort of that you're doing quality work, but you're not stressing things too much. And generally, if the weather isn't super hot, if it's a bit cooler, I can do that in zone 2. So for longer runs, I like to do it at that pace. So that's the pacing strategy that I use. And so far through the training that I've done, this has all felt doable and somewhat comfortable. Definitely have some endurance to build, because right now, once I get above about half marathon, things start to fall down a little bit. But again, the fallback of maybe aerobic pace, that 5 minute per kilometer pace, feels comfortable even when we're getting to like 25, 26 kilometers. So it's good, tons of work to do, but I'm getting there. And given that we've had so much heat here in Taipei, it's really difficult to get long runs in without totally getting destroyed. Because like I said, in the macro goals, I'm trying to maximize recovery. I don't want to just gut myself in a long run, like a 26, 28 kilometer run, and then not be able to run the next day because I still haven't recovered, because I got super dehydrated or I was super sore, or it was a combination of the two. So getting the volume in has been challenging in August, but I'm doing what I can. I had my first 50-mile week last week, which is low for me for a marathon build, but it's what I can manage right now given the weather that I have to deal with. In October, I'm going to be in Seattle in the United States, which is going to be a totally different climate. And hopefully it is going to be much cooler. And hopefully I can really work on volume there, because I feel good with speed right now. But hopefully that cooler temperature will prepare me for New York City, because November in New York City can either be wonderful or it can be just brutally cold. And I am worried about the colder side, because I've lived here in Taipei for almost 3 years now. The coldest it ever really gets here is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's actually frigid here. That's middle of winter. It's about as cold as it gets. That's not that cold. That's kind of like, I think, what a lot of people optimally want for the New York City Marathon. In fact, that may be a little warm for what a lot of people want in the marathon. So I am concerned about the temperature difference, the climate I'm training in versus what I'm going to race in. Seattle's going to be, I think, a good month to just acclimate to cooler temps, because I really have not experienced colder temps in almost 3 years. I was in Japan in the spring, and when I was in Matsumoto, which is in the mountains, the Japanese Alps, I had one morning run where I think it was about 35 degrees Fahrenheit. And I had every possible layer, like my full deep winter kit. Like when I lived in New York, this would be the stuff I would have worn when it was like 0 degrees on a go running. But I was in all of my, running kit, tights, multiple layers, gloves, everything. And I was freezing. So temperature is going to be a thing. I'm a little bit worried about that, but we'll talk more about that next month when I'm in Seattle and how that's going. The plan I'm using is from the Boston Athletic Club. It's their level 3 Boston Marathon training plan. Now, I've used this plan before. I think I found it in 2019. I didn't find it on the Boston Athletic Association's website. I don't know where I got it, but I know it was the BAA, level 3 plan. And I like it because it's got a nice emphasis on volume with speed work. I think more speed work than I typically would expect in a marathon build specifically. Feels a little bit more like what I'd expect in a half marathon build, but that's why I like it, because there's some really fun workouts. There's a lot of 400s, there's some 800s, there's some 1200s in it, which I really like 1200s. And I've been doing all of those on hills, nothing flat, because New York City is very rolly. So I've been training exclusively on rolling or hills for all of my mileage. I've done a few modifications to the plan, and I'll put a link in the description to the plan, so you can go check it out if you wanna go look at it. I've added a little bit more easy running to it. I've added a little bit more volume, particularly in the later weeks. And some of the more complicated workouts I have, I've sort of streamlined those down a little bit because I just find managing like 400 up and then you pause and then you jog back and then you do 400 up at another pace or you come down. Like those are just a little bit too complicated for me to really just want to deal with some days. So I've just really streamlined that to the shorter, speedier stuff is 400s, 800s, and 1200s. There's a lot of 1K marathon pace and half marathon stuff that I've sort of add in there. And then every longer run or run really over 10 miles or 16K, I'm making sure I'm doing at least 4 to 5 of the kilometers in that at marathon pace, if not more. And then occasionally I'll do some progression or I'll do a block of like 2K marathon, 2K half, 2K marathon, something like that in a longer run. And it's been comfortable. And like I said, I'm doing this all on rolling hills. In fact, I do all of my training on a 1 mile out and back. It's the same road I do everything on because I just have tons of data on this road. I know what feels right. And it's got everything. It's got up, it's got down, it's got false flat, it's got good pavement, it's got bad pavement, it's got corners, it's got everything. It's sort of like a micro New York City course, which I think is really powerful. So let's get into the shoe nerdery because I think that's why a lot of you are actually here. So starting from the last video, I talked a lot about using the Nike rotation and the Asics rotation. So the Nike Direct and what I was calling Asics Bounce. And I set a goal to spend all of August, at least 4 weeks, exclusively in Asics shoes, which I did. I spent the last week of July and the first 3 weeks of August, including the week that I had COVID, which I did manage to do some running because I had a very mild case, but still annoying. And I learned a ton. And I do think the amount of foam and FF Turbo, the amount that's in the Super Blast and the Metaspeed Sky Plus, and the ability for me to feel confident really driving my foot into the ground, I do think that helped lengthen my stride. And like I said in the going over the macro goals at the beginning of the video, I think that worked really well. The problem though, and I really ran into really 2, maybe 3 problems with the Asics shoes. The first one is FF Turbo, especially in the Metaspeed Sky Plus, is very, very firm. The Metaspeed Sky Plus, this shoe, this thing is so stiff, so rigid because FF Turbo is a stiff foam. But again, the carbon plates that Asics uses are so stiff. So this shoe runs so rigid, and that's caused a few problems. Now, the first thing that I learned was I don't like a lot of foam under my toes. Now, I talked about in the first episode that I wanted to work on learning how Asics' extreme toe rocker and toe spring affects my hallux limitus, or the toe joint mobility that I have. The short of that is it's not good. It actually limited it because after 4 weeks or so of running only in Asics shoes and then putting on a pair of pegs, my toe mobility was noticeably down. And that's a big problem for me because I work really hard to maintain toe mobility, but running with this extreme toe spring and preloading my toes and not having really any flex in the toe of the shoe, I wouldn't say it killed my toes, but it took all the mobility, not all the mobility, but it took a big chunk of mobility out. And I really noticed it when I went to the softer Pegasus, where there is more flexibility here. I really noticed it here, and it was a problem. I don't like that. So that's a big sort of red X for Asics shoes. I get it more in the Metaspeed Sky Plus because it is so rigid because of the stiff carbon plate that's in there. Little bit less in the Super Blast, but it's still present in the Super Blast because there's just so much foam there. The second thing that I realized, and this is more of I think it's more of a me problem, is that this extreme toe spring or toe rocker that Asics puts in their race shoes, especially the Metaspeed Sky Plus, is a bit of a problem. Because what it ends up doing is you have this extreme angle on the front of this shoe combined with a very firm foam. F&F Turbo is very firm. Again, I've shown this image before. It's not as firm as Lightstrike Pro and it's not as soft as Zoom X. It's somewhere in between them, but it's still on the firmer side of things. So you take that firmer foam, you take the extreme toe rocker and toe spring that's in the Metaspeed Sky Plus, and it creates this extremely extreme angle in the front of the shoe, which means when you're running on uneven surfaces or you're maybe fatigued and not lifting your foot up enough, you end up, at least I do, kicking your toe into the ground, especially on uneven surfaces. Like when you're trying to cross the crown of a road, you end up kicking your toe into the ground. And because of that extreme angle of the toe rocker, the stiff foam, and how grippy the outsole is on the Metaspeed Sky Plus, that shoe grips into the ground, and I stumbled a bunch of times when doing runs in the Metaspeed Sky Plus. And in fact, 2 times I actually tripped and fell. The first time was just between reps. I was doing easy running and I caught that on the crown of the road and I went down. And it was kind of like, oh, that happened. It's kind of annoying, but I didn't really think much of it. A couple days later, I was doing a hard workout and in the middle of a really hard interval where I was at 5K pace. So this is almost all out. I hit it again on some uneven pavement and I went down hard, like a full-on hipper, bloody elbow, cut up hands. It looked like something I used to get when I skateboarded. That's never happened to me when running. And after that fall, I was very leery of the Metaspeed Sky Plus to the point where I just don't trust it. I think it's a great shoe. I love running in it, but I don't trust it. And that's a problem, which means I'm never going to race in this shoe. Not that I do prefer the Vaporfly 3 still, but the fact that I don't trust the Metaspeed Sky because of that sort of toe problem, that's like no bueno for me. Like I will just not race in that shoe because I don't want to be on course and wondering, okay, when am I going to trip? When am I going to trip? I don't want to be thinking that. And it's weird with the Metaspeed Sky Plus because it is such a fun shoe to run in. It's a fast shoe, but that, again, the extreme angle of the toe rocker and the toe spring is just too extreme in my opinion, because I've never had this problem in any other shoe. I don't get it in the Adios Pro 3. I never got it in the Alpha Fly. Those are 2 other shoes that I think of. There's a lot of foam under the toes and there's a lot of foam under the forefoot. I don't understand where that's coming from, but it made me not trust the shoe. Another problem I ran into with both the Super Blast and the Metaspeed Sky Plus is that there's just so much foam under the forefoot. And this is where I kind of started this all with. Not so much here. I don't mind it here where I land. It's more here where I toe off. So if we look at a Vaporfly, you can see like the maximum amount of foam is right here where I'm landing. As a forefoot striker, I'm landing there. I'm getting the maximum amount of foam where I want it. But on toe off, there's much less foam, especially compared to the Metaspeed Sky, which you can kind of see there. Now, I set out on this sort of Asics experiment to kind of try that extra foam under the forefoot, especially the toes, both preloading the toes with the toe spring, but also just, how that felt. Because in small doses, I like how it feels. The Adios Pro 3 from Adidas does the same thing, though it's a little less extreme than what's in the Metaspeed Sky Plus. But that did 2 things. I think it contributes to like that toe tripping thing that I talked about, but it also severely hurt my toe mobility to the point where I moved into the Vaporflies again and the pegs. And like I said, this shoe is much more flexible. Even the Vaporfly compared to the Metaspeed Sky Plus, this is a much more flexible shoe because Nike's carbon plates are much more flexible. They're not as stiff as Asics' plates, and Zoom X is just a softer foam. So as soon as I went to pegs and Vaporflies, I immediately preferred the feeling of them, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I also was finding that my toes were getting very sore, like the toe joint, the knuckle in my big toe is getting very sore from for the first few days of me transitioning back into Nike shoes. And I worked extra, I did extra drills with toe mobility, and I got the toe mobility back and the flexibility back there. But that made me realize that running a lot in a lot of toe spring with a lot of rocker, which I knew I didn't necessarily like. I think it works in the Magic Speed 3, which I don't have here, but it only works because the foam, the FF Blast Plus foam in the Magic Speed 3 is much softer. So I think it cushions a lot more and it allows the plate, which is still super stiff in that shoe, to flex more. So a lot of the response you're getting out of the Magic Speed is because of you're really feeling the plate because you have such a soft, squishy foam in FF Blast Plus in that shoe. Not the same thing here because FF Turbo is just so much firmer than FF Blast Plus that this just becomes really rigid. And then the toe off of this sort of falling off a cliff because of this extreme angle and the amount of toe rocker, it helped me, I think, work on my stride, but it took away toe mobility. And I realized I just don't like the way this feels as an everyday or as my primary race shoe. I much prefer this. And I know in episode 1, I was complaining that sometimes my toes get irritated here. But I will take that feeling, and that's mostly toenail issues and maybe a little blistering, but I'm not getting any of that because the fit of the Vaporfly 3 is much better for me. And that was mostly in the Alphafly 2, which is a nightmare fit for me. And the Vaporfly 2, which that upper was just so wishy-washy to me that it just didn't hold my foot the way this one does. So I'm not getting any of that in this shoe. So I will take the risk of toenail or tip of toe discomfort over killing the mobility in my toe, which the Asics shoes were totally doing. Now, this is not to say that I don't like the Super Blast or the Metaspeed Sky Plus. I love them. I think they're brilliant shoes. I actually think the Super Blast is probably, next to the Magic Speed 3, the best shoe Asics makes. And I said this in my long-term review of the Super Blast, I really put the Super Blast in the super shoe category, and now I'm treating it as such. Because the other thing I learned about the Asics shoes, because there's so much foam in the Super Blast and the Metaspeed Sky Plus, is that I don't like a shoe with a lot of foam overall. The max stack, the above max stack of what's in the Super Blast, after a couple weeks of running on that, it started to irritate my Achilles because there's just so much foam I'm on. There's such a high platform, considerably higher than anything I'm running in Nike. And immediately when I went back to the peg, which has a much lower heel, much less foam in the shoe, immediately the Achilles sort of discomfort, which was never a pain, it was never a problem, it was never an injury, it was just some extra soreness. I felt my Achilles. It completely went away in this shoe as soon as I started running in this shoe and the Vaporfly, which is why I'm running only in these two shoes at this point. The other thing that I realized about having all of that foam underfoot of the Super Blast was that it made moving to this shoe, the Vaporfly 3, my race shoe, it made this shoe feel like a race flap. It made this shoe feel like there's no foam in it because the Super Blast is so high. I don't want this shoe to feel like a race flap. I don't want this shoe to feel like there's a ton of foam in it either, which it doesn't. And that's why I love the Vaporfly, because it does feel a bit more minimal, even though there's maximal cushion in here that really is going to cushion your foot. But going from the Super Blast to a Pegasus or a Vaporfly 3 was extreme in a not so fun way. So again, I have put the Asics shoes away for now. They're not bad. I love them dearly. I think they're amazing shoes. It's just right now where I am in this build. As of tomorrow, that will be the start of week 8. And it's really go time. This is the time where every run in this build matters. And it's important. The easy runs, the workouts, the long runs, they all matter, which is why I made the decision about a week and a half ago to move to running exclusively only in Vaporflies and Pegasus. In fact, the white Vaporfly and the black pegs that I bought, these are new pairs that I just bought. So what my rotation is currently is I have the hyper pink pair of Vaporflies and the white pair of Pegasus 40s that have about 150. In fact, the pegs probably has close to 170 on them. So they're very broken in. They're very molded to my foot. The peg is very flexible, very soft, because that's what happens when you break in a Pegasus. And the Vaporfly actually, now that it has about 150 miles on it, is actually very flexible, much more flexible than a brand new pair, much more flexible than this pair. And I've been doing all of my long runs in that, including long runs that have some easy running in them, because that is now the ultimate long run shoe to me. And then I bought another pair of pegs and another pair of Vaporflies to add to that, so that I have a broken in pair of both, and then I have a fresher pair of both. So the black and white pair of the pegs and the Vaporflies that I have under 50 kilometers at this point on them, and they're much stiffer. The Vaporfly specifically is much stiffer, and I use that for those important speed workouts. And when I go to the States next month, I'm only probably going to bring the white Vaporfly and the black pegs, the newer shoes, because I'll be spending a lot of time in both with higher volume. So again, having a mix of two different Vaporflies at two different states in their life cycle as far as being broken in, and the same with pegs, gives me a ton of options. I have softer shoes, I have more flexible shoes, I have stiffer shoes, I have things that are good for workouts. And that works really well for me. That's worked well for me in the past. I've done that in the past, and it just always works well for me. So I'm back to that because every run right now matters. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you like this type of content, consider subscribing so you'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video and leave a comment, because that always helps, and that helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.